The first expansion pack for Battle Spirits Saga looks like it's going to be a little bit mediocre. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, Espira, and we're back with another Battle Spirits Saga video. This time we are talking about the first expansion set of the game, Elemental Spark. This is a new product line that will have a bunch of packs as well as a bunch of promo specific. Well, they're not really promos. They're like set release cards, but they call them promo cards. But you're guaranteed to pull. Either way, we're going to go ahead and jump into them. We'll see what the product looks like. Then we actually did get an update on the website that showed off the cards. So we'll look at those. Then we'll talk about kind of like how they can potentially impact the meta, but I'm not super high on them. Either way, let's check it out. So to kick us off, like I was saying, this is Elemental Spark EX-01. We were waiting for it. It did get a redesign. The box originally was like green and had a different spirit on it. Now it is gold, which I think is nice. I think the green packaging kind of made it confusing with set 2. So the fact that the gold is kind of more like a standalone, I'm a big fan of that. That releases on June 30th, 2023 and has an MSRP of 20 bucks. What does that $20 get you? It gets you 3 booster packs and then one of each of 9 promo cards for a total of 36 promos. If you end up getting all 4, you will need to buy 4 of these. And that's kind of the context I want to come into when I'm talking about this product line, right? If you want your playset, you're going to need 4 of these boxes, which means you're looking at 80 bucks. What does 80 bucks get you? 80 bucks gets you 12 packs, which is half a box, which right now boxes of set 1 are like $65 ish. So you're getting half a box for the so you're getting half a box for the price of a box, and then you're getting the promo. So basically, in terms of the pack value, it's super not there, but we do get the promo card. So that's the question. Let's jump into the actual promos. We did get an update in the database, which will allow us to be able to check and see what we're getting. So here we are. This is still the Battle Spirits website. They do have a card list, so you go ahead and check there whenever there are updates. And here are the cards from basically this spirit onwards. So we're getting 4 spirits of each color. We're getting a singular promotional dragon. And then we're getting a magic of every color. And they're all the same theme. So we'll look at the first one. That'll apply for all the spirits. The dragon's kind of its own standalone thing, but all the magics are the same. So the spirits all like the same. The magics all like the same. Looking here, we've got the Fire Elemental Rubius. It is a 0 cost. Now that's super interesting, right? 0 costs are this kind of design space that can be dangerous, or it can be interesting, or it can allow a bunch of things here. And it does still have the gem, which means that it does provide a reduction, which is super neat. It is a elemental on level 1. The spirit can't attack, which is great. If these could attack, that would actually be absolutely busted. Like to a point where the game might not be worth playing anymore. And then on level 2, when destroyed, draw a card. So it's kind of nice. It's a body that sits there. It's a blocker. It does give you your reductions. And then in the late game, you're able to kind of block or toss it away to be able to draw a card. Pretty neat. The biggest thing that these spirits allow for is basically allowing you to cheat the curve. On turn 1, if you are the turn player, you are able to play 4 cost spirits because he's going to be on board. You'll get the reduction. And then paying for a spirit happens basically instantly, which means you'll still be able to basically swap the core onto it. Trust me, it makes sense. Once you do it, you get used to it. Or if you're the second turn player, it allows you to play 4 costs and 5 costs. So you can cheat the curve that way. Also, it allows you to potentially put some spirits on level 2 earlier. You could. So I have a list of what those spirits are afterwards, and we'll go ahead and talk about them. But we have one for every single color. So we have red here. We've got purple, which I think is sick and probably one of the more usable ones. We have the Snowbit here, which is the white one. And then finally, Ginger Bloom. So they all do the same thing. They all can't attack on L1. On L2, they draw a card when they die. They're all 1Ks and 2Ks respectively. And they're all 0 cost elementals. I think purple lends itself really well as kind of like a destruction target. Getting a draw when it dies is great. And it also gives you those early reductions to be able to get some nice plays off. Yellow is just super solid because it allows you to be able to go into an early cathedral with a body, which means you can ramp into something on turn 1, which is kind of nice. So those are, I think, the biggest impacts in terms of like what these elementals really allow. Moving on from the elemental, we've got Jewel Dragon Smog, a 4 cost Ruin Dragon on level 1, 2, and 3. Treat the spirit's color and symbol color as purple, white, yellow, green, blue, as well as red. So basically, it's a rainbow card, right? They hinted at us getting a rainbow card. This doesn't give you like 6 reductions, mind you. It doesn't give you like 1 of each on depending on the card. It is just, hey, this red symbol that's in the bottom right corner also actually counts as all of them. So I would argue actually having like a rainbow core is probably better than having a whole skill base to it. But nevertheless, it has two more abilities. On levels 1, 2, and 3, one summon draw a card. If you have fewer cards in your hand than your opponent has in theirs. And then on levels 2 and 3, one summon, place a core from the void to your trash. I won't, bro. This card's an insult to dragons everywhere. Like I can't even. This card is so incredibly bad. Like I was really hoping, like I knew it was gonna be a gimmick, right? Like it's our first Rainbow Spirit. I kind of assumed it was gonna be interesting in some way, but like this is legitimately like an incredibly bad card. Spending 7 cores to be able to ramp one is absolutely horrendous. Spending 5 cores to draw a card, maybe if your opponent has more cards in your hand than you do, is just like, and then like on level two, it's a 4K, which means it's just so bad. And then you need to put 7 cores on it to be an 8K. So I don't know. I understand there's like a balancing act on the fact that it's a Rainbow Spirit, so you have to be careful with it. But this is just like not even gimmicky. This is just not playable. It's unfortunate. Like I can't even sugarcoat it, right? Like at least with the elementals, there's like shells and plays that I can see that makes sense. That would make you want to push towards maybe trying them out. They are better in some decks than others, but in this, I can't even justify it. Like I don't even want to spend more time on it because it's actually just not a card. Then we have the magics. Like I said, same thing with the elementals. The magics are all colors as well. Every single one does the same thing as their respective other colors. So here we have Ruby Radiance, a 2-cost, 1 red reduction, magic on main flash. Select one of your spirits against 2 KBP for the turn, and then you get to draw a card if you have 3 or more red symbols. Of course, those being the symbols in the bottom right corners of the card. Then you have the same thing for purple, amethyst, diamond, and topaz. They all do the same thing. They're all 2 costs with a reduction. They give 2K for the turn, and then they draw a card if you have those 3 symbols. They're fine. They're like a gleam effect, right? And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think any color needed a gleam effect. Yellow might use it. I think it's the only one because obviously you've got luster and you've got like cards that actually care about this kind of thing. But in terms of the other color, they're just not really usable. You'd rather have like hard draw cards or just better battle tricks. So I'm not particularly high on these either. They're not as bad as like the dragon, but realistically, they just don't change the gameplay in any way. And I think that's the biggest theme with these. Is just unfortunately at the moment the way that they work out, they actually don't impact gameplay all that much. They enable a few additional plays, but in terms of what they do to the meta, they're basically the same as 1-drops at the moment. In terms of like what they represent on the body, what they allow as reductions. But there are some lines that are now possible that were impossible before. So I think it is actually worth going into it and then seeing what the impact is. Here, I put aside some cards that can allow us to think a little bit differently in terms of like how the game will play out with these 0-cost elementals in the game. The biggest thing you have to account for is the fact that now with these existing, on turn 1, if you're the one who's starting the game, you do actually have the ability to go into 4-drops. And then as the second turn player, you actually get to go into 5-drops. Alternatively, you also have the opportunity to be able to go into level 2s quicker. That's also a consideration. So for all the 4-drops you see here, I think there's currently actually only 1 and some nexuses. You go into them on turn 1. Alternatively, you are able to go into the 5-drops on turn 2. So the first one I can think of really is like Grey Armor. He's fine, right? You can go into him on turn 1. He has armor red white, which means that if you're going first, your opponent's not gonna be able to get rid of it. And then on next turn, you have an easy way of putting him into level 2 or 3, which allows him to be a really significant blocker. Being a 5K that bumps up into a 8K is pretty good against the aggro matchups we're seeing now. Alternatively, the second turn player can go for Buster Fenrir Cannon. You will only get him on level 1. You won't get him on his level 2 or 3, but putting him down on turn 1 does mean you'll have enough cores to get him on level 2 or 3 the turn afterwards. So, and then he's a pretty decent blocker in terms of like depending on how wide your opponent wants to go. Alternatively, this does open up the yellow decks to be able to go into a turn 1 blast right away. So if you're the turn 2 player, usually you can hippo your opponent if they go for like a turn 1 nexus or something. The yellow elemental will actually allow you to go into dual legal, which means you basically have 2 lines to be able to get your 8 of blessed creatures out onto the board and attacking, which is kind of relevant. Alternatively, you can get a turn 1 Odin. It kind of doesn't do anything. The turn you put it out, it would just be a 3k. But again, it does mean that on turn 2, you can jam 2 additional cores on it. That's way easier to do than waiting on turn 2 and then going into turn 3. And then from there, you would have a very solid 5-drop. Okay. This one's kind of funny. It's not really going to happen all that often, but I thought it was jokes. Basically, if your opponent is like the first turn player and they go incredibly wide, like white aggro decides to dump their entire board off rip, and then you just kind of sit there, you can play the red elemental as the turn 2 player and then go into Leon, which would board wipe them. That's not typically what white aggro players tend to do, but I think it's absolutely hilarious. If they ever play into it, it's something you can do. From there, I'm not saying you can play Nemesis turn 2. That's not what I'm saying at all. But purple actually lends itself to probably being one of the best elementals just because it is a solid body that can, like, it can get you some early reductions, which is pretty relevant depending on if you're like trying to get into an early depths or something like that. And then on top of that, afterwards, it's a body you don't mind killing away. So then with 3 cores on them, you're able to kill it away, be able to draw a card, and then be able to do more stuff Nemesis does. So I think purple, it kind of lends itself to being one of the better ones for sure, just because it has all those death triggers that might make it relevant in terms of being something more that the cards can do. From there, we do have the Curse Dragon combo. Having the 0 cost elemental in your hand gives you a basically free reduction, which means instead of 14 on an empty board, purple can actually Curse Dragon combo at 12 cores if you have the elemental plus Baculus plus Curse Dragon. That's pretty relevant. I do think that the combo costing 14 if your opponent if you have an empty board is one of the biggest like factors that makes it tough to be able to get the Curse Dragon combo off early enough if you really need it. So being able to do it earlier is a pretty big deal, and obviously that scales with the more elementals you have in hand. So again, another knock on like purple just being one of definitely the better elementals in terms of the ones that we have access to. Then it's Nexuses. The biggest thing you can see is that you're getting value or able to play a Nexus early, which is a pretty big deal. Blessed Cathedral being one of the biggest ones. You're able to play out the yellow elemental, then you're able to play Blessed Cathedral on 3, and then you have a spirit that can block and ramp you, especially in a aggro meta. This is huge. It means that you can go into your turn 2. Let's say your opponent plays like 2 or 3 spirits. If you're up against like white aggro or something, you go first, which like they get to attack first, which has always been a little precarious, and you want your Cathedral out, well, then you can play your Spirit, you can play Cathedral, then they attack, you block, you're going to get your ramp 1 there, and then they attack for you too. So then you have access to those 3 additional cores while still being at a life total of 3, which is pretty relevant. So on that front, I think generally the yellow is super solid, specifically because it enables Cathedral plays better. Alternatively, you could also go for a turn 1 Mothership. Mothership does only require 4 cores total when you have the reduction on board. So you can just have the reduction, then you can spend 4, get Mothership on. And then from there, you do get those cores back at the start of your opponent's attack step, which means you can then Ice Shield, you can then Dream Bomb, you can kind of do anything. So as much as like I love Mothership, but always said it was kind of just never in a place to really do something, the fact that these exist mean that is now a possible turn 1 play for the turn 1 player, which actually kind of maybe gives it some room to actually do something spicy. Definitely makes it more viable in my opinion that you're not forced into it being a turn 2 play. So that is actually a pretty decent dub. Nevertheless, I don't think any of this changes the meta, right? I think it enables some plays. I think the big things are like Curse Dragon's kind of relevant. Yellow, which is already on an uptick, you're getting a bit of a boost here, especially working alongside Cathedral, I think is definitely something that goes into its camp. And in terms of like white, it gives you earlier options. It gives you Mothership early, which is kind of a big deal. It also provides you like some bodies you can kind of go into that allow you to be more defensive early, kinda, but that is at the opportunity cost of doing something like playing Fish, which gives you like a 5k body right away. But of course, you could have that and Fish potentially in terms of the elementals. So it's tough to say. I just wish they were more impactful, right? Like at $80 for a playset, of which the value of that is like 12 packs, which by that time there's going to be so much more set 1 opened, especially with the fact that there's like more buy a box incentives for set 1 in the coming months with like the Pro ZD promos and everything like that. It just lends itself to me thinking these are just really bad value. They don't impact the game enough to justify the price tag. The packs, I mean, I'm sorry, but we're going to be opening so much set 1 product within the next month because of like all the different incentives and all that it kind of just doesn't lend itself. So the elementals are spicy. I think there's some things they enable. I will say I leave it open to the elementals scaling over time. I do think there's a room that the more cards we get, the more they're going to enable where you want your reductions more. The stronger they are, the stronger we get 4 and 5 drops that we're going to want to play. These enable those, and I think that is pretty important. And I think though, at the very minimum, while there feels bad now, generally they do scale with the design of the game, which is fine. I said it on the Discord. I think Jewel Dragon is like an insult to my intelligence. This card is so bad that it's just like it's. You would hope that they would make a card that's like at least exciting, because then at least it can like do something. This isn't even exciting. The most exciting part about this card is the fact that it's rainbow, but you can't really do anything with it. It's just, I don't know. Anyways, I don't love this. And then the magics are whatever. Yellow has luster, which means like there's some room where you could do something with this one. The other colors just don't really need this. A battle trick that cycles is like fine, but probably doesn't see enough utility to warrant it, even if we're in a world where you're kind of like having a suppression war. That's the biggest thing for this one, is the fact that like we're in a suppression format, which means there's a world in which this helps you fight over a suppression, and at least it draws you a card. So like it's fine, but it's not exciting, and they're kind of mediocre. And I think that's the biggest thing with these, is the fact that they're just mediocre. They're fine, but it's a pretty expensive product and ask if you're specifically aiming to get just the promo cards, and they're not that impactful. And I don't know. I want product to be impactful. I'm not saying they need to break the format, but it just feels like at the moment they don't do anything. Either way, guys, please let me know how I'm wrong. I had like a solid like hour-long discussion at like midnight when these came out on the Discord. A lot of people feel certain ways about it. I think the consensus is generally that they won't change the meta, but they open up room for the game's design to go in interesting places. So if you guys have any ideas in terms of like how we could utilize these elementals, or maybe I'm wrong about the magic, maybe the dragon is the best card in the game. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. And with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.